So I would like to introduce Pablo from a project of DTHG, which is called Digital DTHG, where they do, but I'm quite sure you can explain that way better than I can, all kind of digital and virtual projects based on theater technology, which can be virtual reality theaters to see how they worked in history, equipment that can be virtualized and can be used in a virtual way to teach, models of historical equipment, all that type of stuff. And if I'm right, Pablo is going to talk mainly about the Große Schauspielhaus.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction and also for the invitation to give us the opportunity to show what we are doing and what our project is about, and giving a glimpse in our understanding of how we see the interconnection between theater heritage and immersive technology in our project. So you all see my screen, right? It is shared. And you see it over. Okay, perfect. So opening night at the Große Schauspielhaus Berlin. Oh, I hear myself. Okay. Opening night at the Große Schauspielhaus Berlin. How can we bring theater heritage to life with immersive technology is the main topic, as Chris already said. And before I start with that, I will give you a little, very brief introduction in what we actually are. So. A while ago, Franziska Ritter and I did a workshop that was a 2 weeks workshop for the DTHG, and that was called Immaterial Theater Space. It was a 2-week workshop with participants from all over the world, and we created 7 very, very rough prototypes of how the technology can open up windows into the past of the theater, or also into the future, showing buildings that are not existing anymore or not existing yet. So that was more or less the task for those 2 weeks. And this project or this workshop went so very well that we also showed it actually exactly 2 years ago, I think, at the Stage Set Scenery in Berlin, for example, and at the PQ. And people were saying, that is a nice project, it's a nice idea. So why don't you go further into that? And that's what we did. We went to the ministry, the Ministry of Culture and Media. It's not really exactly a ministry, but close enough. And said, okay, we have this project, we have this idea, and we want to do this in the name of the DTHG. And well, they granted us funding for 2 years. And that's what we did. So we started this research project into the topic of augmented and virtual reality in the context of theater, but being the DTHG mainly the backstage part of theater, right? So architecture, theater technology, and the stage in itself, but less into the idea of how can it be part of a performance, but more how can it be part of the backstage area and the thinking about theater technology and the teaching about theater technology. So in starting this research project that was for 2 years, we also kind of founded the new field of competence at the DTHG that is called Digital DTHD. And Franziska Ritter and I are project leads for the research project, but also responsible, or the representatives of the DTHG for those new fields of digitality in the context of theater. Well, so much about that. I don't have to say anything about the DTHG itself, right? Because people here probably know what that is, right? Okay, good. Then I will go one step further in what we do in the research project. So as I said, in this research project, we try to bring these two fields together, these two spaces in a way. So on the one hand, the theater, and on the other hand, the technologies, what we call immersive technologies, that is mainly on the technology part, mainly augmented reality and virtual reality. But right now we see how other technologies also go into that, so that it could be physical computing that at a later point joins in, or projection mapping, and all kinds of technologies that blend the different kinds of reality that we perceive together. And well, what is theater for us? I don't have to tell you too much about that because we are all from the same field in this way. So it's not about the houses themselves, it's not about the theaters themselves, but also everything that is connected. There could be industry that is connected to theater, archives, museums, universities, institutions, other research facilities that also go into the same field of research from the side of the theater, but also from the side of the technology. So bringing these things together, we see what opens as a space in between them. And what we do is we research new solutions, we develop new solutions, we research new paths that we can take, and all what we do, we will try to transfer back into the theater landscape. So that is our mission statement in a way. I am not sure how much people here in the audience know about the technology, though, so I don't have to explain much about the theater, but it will give a little introduction to the technology that we are dealing with. So don't have to tell much about reality. Reality, sorry for the slides being in German here, but it's simple. I'm going to explain anyways. So reality is the physical world that surrounds us. Yeah? The things, the desk, the computer, everything that we see and do. Augmented reality is when I have this kind of reality surrounding me and overlay that with a digital content in a way. So it could be using my phone that gives me the reality through the camera and then displays it here on my display, and then augments it, puts additional content on top of it, and that could be 3D objects or it could be just a digital overlay. Another way to access augmented reality is using augmented reality headsets. So it is similar to a VR headset. Probably most of you have an idea how that looks like, but it has glasses instead of a screen. So I can see the physical world surrounding me, and the digital content is overlaid as a micro projection onto the little screens. And virtual reality as the full, I think I can go to the next slide here, the full immersive simulation of an artificial digital environment. So I put a virtual reality headset on and I immerse myself, I dive into this virtual reality, into this artificial reality. And if the immersion is being done good enough, I probably will forget about the physical world because I'm so deep into this simulation that I perceive everything there, and it starts to be a real reality in itself. It starts to be something that I will remember as something that I lived, as an experience that I lived through. So here again, as a little GIF animation, so we see the full immersion. Someone is so deep inside that the person doesn't really, is more with the presence more in the virtual world than in the physical, probably. The augmentation of this sculpture through the phone. And on the right side, mixed reality as a advanced augmented reality in a way, because we really put 3D objects into our physical space and are probably and should be able to interact with these as well. So let's say here in this context, we have this body of a person, and we can extract the skeleton and maybe activate something or go into details, whatever. So this is the technology. I think just to give a very, very basic understanding of what technologies we are working with. So starting with how can we use virtual reality to access theater heritage. And one of our research projects we have in our bigger research project, we go into different topics, and one of them was theater architecture or theater architectural heritage, and we cooperated with the Friedrichstadtpalast in Berlin because they see themselves as the, how do you say that, the followers in a way of, or the Erbe, yeah, not heritage, but well, the people that came from the same stage as the Große Schauspielhaus, and that's why they, in the last year, celebrated the 100th anniversary of Große Schauspielhaus, because they see themselves as still in this line. And I'm not going to say much about the Große Schauspielhaus because I want to say about how we work with that, but Große Schauspielhaus was built or was set into a building that was already existing in 1990 and had was built or designed by the architect Hans Pölzig. And during the years that followed, it became one of the iconic theater architects, the architectures in Europe. That was at a later point not yet destroyed, but changed so much through the Nazis and then the times that came until it was torn down in the 80s. So the building, in a way, doesn't exist anymore. And we wanted to make this building accessible. What we did was we teamed up with the Friedrichstadtpalast, but also with archives like the Technisches Kabinett of the Opera in Leipzig, or the archives in Berlin that also still had a lot of material. We brought those objects into the digital realm in a way. So sometimes we had plans, sometimes we had real objects. We took photos of the real objects. We took 3D scans that we later did not use in the way we wanted them to use them in the beginning. They were not detailed enough, so we reconstructed those. Here we see Sasha, who is at that point reconstructing the stage projector based on photographies that we had, and also having the technical manuals as reference to rebuild this thing in a digital thing. So that was at one point the question, what do we want to do, a reconstruction or a scan? Because the reconstruction is not the original, it's not even the scan of the original. But at this point we said, okay, this is okay to use and to reconstruct instead of scanning the original object. So it might not have all the little marks and dents that the object has through its life, right? What we did, and I tried to follow the last talk, but as much as possible. But of course, we also asked ourselves the questions: what did we do? What do we do with the data? We want to do our experience, but of course also we spread the data as wide as possible, so people can use it, and also the data will be stored on so many different computers and storage devices, and it might hopefully live on in this digital realm and not be as fragile as digital data normally is. So we brought all these objects into Sketchfab, for example, and we're going to put it on different digital repositories as GitHub as well. And here we see a reconstruction of the Wolkenapparat, the cloud machine that projected clouds onto the stage background. And this were all little props that are later coming into our virtual experience. So that was the objects that we reconstructed, but the main protagonist of our virtual reality experience is the building itself. That's why we did it. We wanted to recreate the building and create the experience of moving through this building and experiencing the building. And this is just a little example of what we had, what kind of data sets we had. We had different plans of the building from different times. They did not check out together. We had differences of several meters over the whole length. We had parts of the columns that were differently put in the different plans, but in a way we interpolated and extrapolated as close to what we think was probably the reality as possible. So at one point we had to step back from scientific correctness at a point. It was just not possible for us to rebuild this, the building and being able to say, okay, this is certified correct and is certified the way it was. At some points we had to take a certain kind of liberty. There was no other way around. So we had plans, we had photos, mostly architectural photos. So what we did not have much was people being there. So there was references of sizes missing sometimes because people helped. And also we never saw how it really was in an opening night, for example. That was what we wanted to recreate. And there were some movies that were filmed on location in the Große Schauspielhaus that we also could use at some points at reference. And using all this little snippets of data, sometimes more detailed and sometimes less, we tried to bring all this together. And again, Sasha in Blender and using the plans, rebuilding step by step the architecture, and then also always checking, so using the plans as reference to build it, but then also always checking it with the pictures to see, okay, is this, we think this is this perspective, does this work with the 3D? And most of the time it worked really, really well. At some points it did not, but here we can see it worked, and we could see, okay, this is close enough for us to recreate this experience. Yeah, this is a flight, a very quick flight through what we call the rough building. Yeah, it's like the undecorated, untextured building of our reconstruction of how we think everything was. And at some points we didn't have the details, so we had to leave it open, or we had to hide it later in the shadows. There was no other way. All this data will be, not yet, but it will be made accessible at the end of the project, so everyone can use this reconstruction and maybe correct things or go deeper into some details. We hope that people will use it. So the next thing was, how do we show this aesthetically? Because we don't know everything, we said we want to keep it as close as to an architectural sketch as possible, more to give the idea of the building instead of the reconstruction of a reality that we could not give, because we didn't have color photography from the building. We didn't know what materials were used for all the details. So we said, okay, we're going to use like a paper optic for everything that is the building, and the objects themselves are as realistic as possible. But just the museal, the archival objects, exhibits in a way are there. And the people we will put in as drawn figures more. So the evening or the experience will be as a spatial graphic novel in a way. So these are two of the sketches of how we thought, okay, the look could be like, or this could be the direction of how this could be. And the next step was when we had, well, it was not so linear. Things, of course, were sometimes at the same time. We developed the idea of, okay, we want to talk, show the story, the history of the building, but we don't want to give a history lesson that people will find boring, maybe, yeah. So what we did was that we said we will follow 3 people through the building and see an evening in this building, a premiere night, from their perspectives or with their perspective, having their comments on what they saw. And the building had actually 3 entrances, and that was good for us because we wanted to have 3 stories. So we have the main, we have the main entrance, and the visitor goes in. That is the part of the fictional character of Walter Schatz, and you will see the architecture, you will see the auditorium and everything in its architectural greatness. You have Fritzi Massari, a real-life person who was the star on the stage at that time, and with her we go into the actor's entrance and the dance entrance, and we see the life from her perspective. She talks about being a star who gets older. Also, she's not the youngest at this point, the youngest star, and she talks a bit more about that. And the backstage entrance, we have Otto Kempowski, again, a fictional character. He is the Beleuchter. He is at the lighting system, and he has the duty to the first time to put the spot on Fritz Massari later. And he's a bit nervous about that. And he goes backstage, he goes to the cantina first, drinks a beer, then goes up and so on, and smokes a cigarette. And he talks about us to us about the technology, everything that we see backstage. So here we have our three characters that lead us through the building, and that was also, we wanted to give the story and the history in a kind of en passant way. So we follow these, we have an interesting evening, and en passant we learn about the history of the building, the history of society, the history of theater at that point, and theater technology. And well, at this point we also used, working on a digital project, sometimes we use very analog tools to think about what was going to happen, even peanuts. And being an interdisciplinary team, we also used a lot of the more scenic ways of creating an experience like that. We made storyboards, we created a dramaturgy for each character and for each person, and also a spatial dramaturgy of what we want to see at what point and what's going to happen on the music channel. So we have audio is very important. So I have to check the time. And well, that was the more artistic storyboard, and for the emotional mapping. And of course, we have the party tour where we see, okay, what kind of historical objects are we going to use at what point, and we have the different layers, and always rechecking with the original photography, with our 3D images. Saying, okay, what is the focus here? What objects do we want to show? How can we show them best? And how can we implement those into a storyline? And so we had a writer write the three stories as a script, like a film script in a way. So, and in the end, we had all these kind of assets, as they are called in game design, and we brought them all together in Unity. That is a game engine. That is the software that is used to bring the 3D objects together with the audio, together with the voice actors, together with the VR technology. To here down in the lower part of the screen, we can see how it is basically a bit sometimes like Premiere or other video programs, where you put the audio layers, activating objects, activating the light for the space, activating the sound at a certain point based on a timeline, for example. And here you can see all the lights that are in a scene like that to recreate as good as possible a virtual lighting to give the atmosphere in the space. So this is the team, a big team on the left side. We see all the people that work on it very closely to us. So in this office spaces most of the time, script by Alcara here, for example. Franziska and I did the project management, also parts of the concept and visual aesthetics. And then we have graphic designers, people to do the subtitles, everything had to be done. It was the production grew bigger and bigger in the time that we were working on it. And then, of course, we have the partners, the external partners like the archives, the musicians, the actors, and of course the Große Schauspielhaus that helped us a lot. So a lot of people working on something like that. And I think now I can show you how that looks like in a trailer, right? Because to see this in reality or virtual reality, you need a headset and a computer strong enough to render that. But it is available for free on Steam. That's a gaming platform, so you could download it if you have access to the technology. And it is planned that after the pandemic, we're going to show this at Friedrichstadtpalast as an constant installation. It will be part of the little exhibition they have in the foyer, but right now we are planning with the physical opening in 2022. So we have to wait a bit. But Franziska and I want to show it as much as possible. So if at one point we can meet again, we will bring it with us and we will show it to you if possible. So right now I can only show you the trailer, but I hope it translates a bit of what we tried to do here. Sound coming through? Oops. All right. So now I have a few slides. I'm just talking over the slides. We are not going back to the year 1919. We are going actually back to the year 1927. And because it was at the height of the popularity of the building, and here we have how Walter Schatz goes into the building, and he's the first time in the theater, and he talks about his experience and how he liked it, and is very astonished of this kind of architecture that he never saw before, and then the curtain opens up, and it actually opens up like that, the Iron Curtain as well, and he sees Fritzi Massari, and this is something that we did, that we always see all the other characters as well, because in the end they all come together in the auditorium, and here we have Fritzi coming into the actors' entrance with the paparazzi waiting that already existed at the time, and going to her room, her dressing room, and talking to the people that come there and ask for autographs and stuff like that, and also seeing parts of the backstage and what happened, the hustle and bustle of what happened backstage. And yeah, so much about that project. I will be happy to answer questions about it later. And Chris asked me to also give a short glimpse, because I'm already at the end of the time, into what we're working with him and with the Canon project together. And what we do is an augmented reality connected to the Canon project. We kind of click in at some point, creating an interface into what Chris will show later. And what we try to do is create an interface that allows us to access the database that they are building, and making things visible in space, in physical space. So there we're using a technology that's called WebXR. It's relatively new. It started as a standard actually a year ago now, so it's very, very young. It's very prototypical at some point. Some things change so quickly that we have to change also our development at the same time, because suddenly some things don't work anymore. But what we think is that this is the future of virtual content or virtual spatial content, is to use that, because the good thing about it is that it's not dependent on specific hardware. So the virtual Schauspielhaus that you just saw only works on a specific system, right? The good thing about WebXR is you can use your smartphone again, you can use the laptop to access the data, you can use a VR headset, or you can use an augmented reality headset and access the same kind of website or data through the different systems. It will just be displayed differently. So on your computer, on your smartphone, you still have the 3D object, and you can swipe and you can use and you can zoom in. But if you put a headset on, you see it spatially in front of you, and you zoom by actually moving your body towards this object, and you can go around the object. So that is what we see really interesting about that. And also the good thing is that in a WebXR environment, you could theoretically bring people together using different technologies. And by that, making it way more accessible for people who may be not able to use some different kinds of technologies. So that is where we see the future, and why we use this in more and more of our projects. And what do we want to do with that? We have these kinds of digitized objects of theater heritage, of theater technology heritage, and that are going to be collected in the database that is built up in the Canon project. And through a connection, through a web-based interface connection, we want to access these 3D objects, also the small text or media files, and make those accessible, for example, through an augmented reality timeline. So Chris, you are working on this timeline, for example, and we want to add these objects onto the timeline, so it can be used in teaching or in a university, or also in other kinds of presentations. And this is just our first prototype, and we're actually kind of working on the second prototype right now. Chris already saw it, and it works actually pretty well, the second prototype as well. The first one was still a bit glitchy. Here we have a little video about from the first prototype. And you see it's still not perfect. It's still a bit jittery, but it kind of worked already. And what we wanted to show with the first prototype is that we're going to mix different kind of media. So bringing in the text information, also the spatial information. And so at a later point, you can really have the Wolkenapparat, for example, the cloud machine, and go into the detail and see something, go further back. And maybe if you turn around, you see it in its original scale. So here we have on the timeline a smaller scale, and if you turn around, it could be a 1-to-1 scale, and you see how big a Wolkenapparat in reality really is, for example. Yes, and I think this brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you. Well, is it written with a U or with a G? I don't know. I'm so sorry. But thank you well for your attention. And if there are any questions, please feel free.
Okay. Well, Pablo, thank you very much for the fantastic experience. I've experienced it live, and it's even way more impressive at that moment.
Always.
How do you see the future of this type of project?
So we work the whole project or the specifics?
Well, is it continuing the project? Let's start with that.
Okay, the project should end in autumn, and we are going to end development process in autumn. We got a bit more time, but as it's called cost neutral time expansion, so we don't get more money from the government. So we will have time to develop until autumn, and then we have a few months to document it, and also to find funding to continue our work. Because what we saw right now, the same as with our initial workshop, where people said, okay, this is super interesting, do more about it. It's the same now. Now we know, for example, the Große Schauspielhaus project, we have the 3D data, we have the 3 storylines. Franziska is working on the Technical University about a theater heritage project right now. And people there are extremely interested and say, okay, how can we work on top of that what you already did? So it could be different, could be new stories, seeing the work of Marlene Möschke, for example, that is right now not very visible, because in the end she was very, very much in charge of the design of a lot of things that we see. It's not Hans Pölz. He did some of the things, but she did all the details. And that would be one thing. Or making the building more exploratory, so you don't go following the three protagonists or other protagonists, but you really go down through the building yourself, finding objects, getting other kinds of information, for example. Or bringing the object into a completely different realm as well. So there are different points where we could say, okay, let's continue the work on this project. And the same goes for what I showed you in the end, the WebXR technology. We hope that we will get additional funding to work further on that, because it is not just to talk about theater history. We can use this tool to do a lot of things. First of all, and we're also working on those other areas as well with the same tool. And that's our idea, create a virtual tool, a software tool that, like a hammer or a nail, can be used for a lot of different things. So this WebXR tool can be used to talk about architecture projects with people that cannot read the plan, because technical drawings are not for everyone to read. We know that. We have, for example, one partner is Freilichtbühne. It's an open-air theater, and they have a lot of renovations to do. But the mayor of the town, who actually has to write the check in the end, does not understand why all the things are so expensive. And they tried to use plans, and he couldn't understand it still at this point. So what we do is use augmented reality floor plans, showing the complexity of this mountain with all because it's an open-air theater built in a mountain and on top of a mountain, to show the complexity of the tunnels, the stairs and everything. And if you have this 3D object, it works much better. And at the same time, we also check if we can go to different scales, because then, and that is something that is going to start next week with Concerthaus in Berlin, is that we want to see, using the same technology that we use for the Canon project, augmenting the stage and see if a stage design that is being made can be put on screen artificially, like a Bauprobe in a way, and people can see it and go into the auditorium, stand at some point back and see, okay, this works. I can see everything on stage right now, or we have to make it bigger because I can't see it anymore. So that is what we try to go on researching in the next years, hopefully. Yeah.
But it also gives a lot of possibilities to reach out to an audience. For example, if you walk at night at the city, you pass a theater, you could technically have a QR code and visit the theater even when it's in use or during closing hours.
So Concerthaus in Berlin is pioneering in this field already longer before we existed as Digital DTHD. So it's a very good pilot example of how that can work. They said, we have this building, but the building is open only for a few hours at night. But we want to give people the possibility to experience the building and what's happening there during the day as well. I mean, there are thousands of tourists normally, not right now, but going through the Gendarmenmarkt every day. I mean, this is a very public place, and people go up the stairs. And they had like pamphlets, they had like little prospects, little things to show, paper prints. But of course, there was no way for people to understand the grandness of everything. So they collaborated with HTW, Hochschule, so University for Technical, but it's a polytechnical, and they're very, very far into creating. Combining culture with computer science, and they're very good at that. And they had different kinds of stations there. So a VR headset where you can go into the building. So you go into the foyer and you put the VR headset on, and you can go to different areas of the building, also areas that you normally wouldn't see. They have augmented reality installations where you can see the building from the outside, and the closer you get with the tablet, you go into the parts of the building. So it is a way to communicate with the audience before something happens in the building, and it might bring an understanding of, I mean, you all know how much bigger the part backstage of the building most of the times is in relation to everything people see in the front of the building. And then it also gives an understanding of all the work that is being done in something like an opera or a concert house or a theater. And I think that is in the future very, very, very important for theaters, museums, operas to do that. So people know what the state money goes into and why, or why a ticket price is how it is. They have to understand, because another way, at one point they say, why? Why? We don't see why it is so important. And I think this is one way to make this understandable for people.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we always have trouble with is that stage machinery is so big that you never can see it as a whole. And on top of that, we try to hide everything, so it's very difficult.
Yeah.
This could be a way to view through the walls and see the whole of the machinery from the house.
Yeah,
and see how big it is and how it works. So I hope you continue the project.
Yeah,
more money.
Actually, what you just said also is part also of the WebXR thing, and we are collaborating with Beuth Hochschule in Berlin. They have this course, the study course for theater technicians, and we use this different kind of technologies to train them and to educate them in the ways. And we have two things right now that we're working on. So one is a project with the students, where the students themselves in virtual reality or for virtual reality create like test scenarios. So it could be, it's very simple, but very cool. The rig is still down. It's not pulled up yet. And you have to go through the rig and to see the safety hazards. So someone left a hammer lying on top of the rig. So take the hammer away before it falls on somebody's head. Check the signs, the security signs. This is still certified. And all those things, yeah, is this correct way of securing the rig and all those things, or a light spot is not well done at a point. All those things, and people check. So this is one thing that the students do, or how to cable a video interface from some very technical. Okay. And the other thing is that we collaborated with Gerrits. I don't know how internationally or how you know Gerrits in Belgium, but they have the curtain rails, right? So technical setup for the curtain rails. And what we did test with the Deutsche Theater, for example, we took the technicians and gave them different setups, virtual reality, tablet, augmented reality headset, and they got an augmented reality tutorial how to set up the curtain rail. Because it sounds simple, but it's relatively complicated in the end, with all the little objects that have to be put in a certain order. And we kind of made a virtual reality IKEA setup instruction. And they loved it. And because also, so we had very young theater technicians directly from school or still at school. They said, we need this at the university, at our school. We need this at our school because at the theater, we don't have the time to learn it. And in school, we don't have the objects. So having the objects, at least virtually, and training with these is just would be a real big help. So later at the theater, we know what they are talking about. As you said, the machinery is so big, or the time is not there. At the theater, they have to work all the time. They have to do different things. They're learning by doing, but probably not learning about curtain rails at that point. And also the theater technicians, the older ones said, okay, this is cool because in the end they don't often build a curtain rail, for example. And it could be also a different kind of machinery where you can also look into the machinery, understanding how a motor works that lifts the weight and what is behind it with all the brakes and the security systems in it. So understanding, looking into the technology through our technology, that would be what we want to research deeper into.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? You've been too clear.
That's good, I hope. So anyways, if you are, so you have our email on the screen right now, digital VJHG. You can see the videos there. It's not only German, we have the website in German and English, so feel free to go there and also get into contact with us if you're interested into one of our projects. There are many more projects and fields that we try to research right now. Just have a look, and if you find something, just contact us. We would be very happy to stay in contact with all of you.